Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 3-for-1 Sky Fantasy Podcast from Fantasy Football Hub. Paul, how was your Sky weekend?
A little frustrating. I had a loose plan, and there was three players that I was considering for moving in yesterday, and two players scored 11, and the person I picked scored 2. So it feels like one of those 50-50 or 33% if you're going on 3 decisions that I was on the right side of last season, but it's not one of those ones that I regret. Like, if I was in that position again, I felt my rationale for picking the player I did was sound. So yeah, I'm not too disappointed. I'm frustrated, but not disappointed by my own decision making.
Yeah. I know you were tossed up between a few players, and when you go through it all through the different layers of picking and you come to your decision at the end and you're comfortable with it, then it doesn't quite hurt that much, does it, as when you've got a bit of a gut feel over two and you go for the one, the other comes in. But as long as you went through your process and you're happy, then I suppose this thing, and as you say, 50-50s, they give massive swings. All week on Green Arrow I was saying that I was convinced the swing going between that, like fourth midfielder spot in FPL between like Mitoma, Diaby, and Bowen and all this was going to be really swingy, and it was, and it's kind of unfair almost because they're all fantastic picks with fantastic fixtures, aren't they? But it's the way it happens. I had a disappointing week. I've gone up in rank overall from the last pod. Spurs have played twice since then. But I was hoping for a bit of a rise this weekend. Didn't really happen. I was 9.5k going into the Spurs match last week. Obviously, Spurs did really well. Did okay on Friday as well. But I made a couple of transfers this weekend, and I dropped. I was 4.5k to 5.7k, and I feel like I've got the same team as everyone else, or I maybe even might kind of a move behind still, and I've probably used more transfers than most people now as well. So I'm in that horrible spiral at the moment of not having, or kind of not being where I want to be. And if you've not used that many transfers, you kind of think, it's not too bad. But I've got a solid team. But I think I'm kind of the same as you a little bit. 50-50s haven't really worked out so far this season like they did last year. So, but they are for some. I see Luke Williams is currently in 41st place overall. So his 50-50s are absolutely flying in very, very well. Played there, Luke. Before we move in, welcome to everyone in the chat. Bake97 is in. Darren Skidmore, FPL Matty Winalot. Dave Hannigan is in. John A. Conley, Gary Plant, Paul Kendo, Alan Jago. HA says Watkins captain didn't go great. Yeah, it's such a funny old game, isn't it? What a plum.
Only 4 points.
Yeah.
It was only 4 points less than Salah, though, and I think Salah was more popular than Haaland, so...
Tim is in. Bert Welsh. Steve Manning says, hey guys, great to be joining live for a change. Windy is in as well. Adam Byron, Jason Harry, Dave Perrins is in. Donny FPL. He said the merry-go-round of Salah to Son and back to Salah has done quite well so far. Well played. John Maloney and Dave Power and Luke Sutcliffe. Welcome all. Great to have you with us this fine Monday afternoon. We had a really good question, Paul, which you wanted to touch on first. It was around sort of, have you got the question in front of you there?
Yeah, it's from Dave Hannigan. So how do you cope with self-doubts after making a plan and transfers? Hold on to the team now and try not to make changes until future game week, but want to enjoy the days in which not having to worry about it.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. I think I've mentioned quite a few times on the pod before that my own, where I try and differentiate is the ability to kind of generate a plan very quickly. If looking at that first hour when you get the first team sheet of the day, and if there's any news, and it's not something. Mostly this season, there's not been any mass surprises, but 4 or 5 times a season it'll happen, and then I generate a new plan quickly. But I don't play for 1 week to 1 week, so the decision which I was making this week was to take out Colwell, and I had extra budget, and the players I'd been looking at was Tsimikas, Diaby and Mitoma. And I could have went for Diaby thinking, oh, like they've got Luton at home. That's a plum fixture, one of the best fixtures on the Premier League calendar just now. That probably along with, well, yeah, all the promoted sides at home, Sheffield United, Burnley. But I just thought with I preferred Brighton's fixtures and I preferred Mitoma's minutes over Diaby. I'd had a look at the hub player comparison tool, and both players actually came out very similar in terms of their stats and chances and big chances, touches in the box, etc. as well. So I always go back to, would I regret making the decision? And I don't think I regret making that decision this time round. And would I make a similar decision again? Probably. So I can rest easy a little bit there. And when you get past that first kickoff point on the days, particularly on Saturdays where you've usually got 3 or 4 kickoff times as well, there is very little that you can do. So I tend to switch off and then always just make sure that I've got at least 15, 20 minutes in that opening hour before the following day, that if I need to regenerate a plan, I've either got access to Ian Parron's planner, or I play that many fantasy formats that I've got a good idea of all the fixture runs and how things play out anyway. So any previous moves I've usually made is to give myself a bit of flexibility, move on to the 4-4-2 formation where possible, because that's the easiest formation to come out of for future moves. So if you're always making plans like that, you're never tied down too much. And I always think that given that respite the following day, I know that everyone's not in the same position and people work weekends and stuff and might not have that availability. But I've came to terms with the fact that it's not an outcome based.
Yeah.
It's not always outcome based on that day, and if there's a lesson to be learned, then I'll take that away and think about it. But if it's a case that I'm just on the wrong side of what I would deem as a marginal call on 50-50, then yeah, I can get around that quicker.
Yeah, really good advice there. And yeah, definitely play sort of the same way. Looking now from this coming weekend up until, I think I've got up until Christmas Eve up on here now, there's been a lot of chat this week, and quite rightly so. I think we identified it last week that in terms of captaincy days, apart from Wolves and Fulham on Monday the 27th of November, there doesn't seem to be any need, to quote James from Planet FPL, as opposed to need and want, any requirement to make any transfers for lots of engaged managers who will have, Spurs assets, potentially a Chelsea asset, Brighton asset, Villa asset. It looks like all the captaincies up until that day, apart from Wolves and Fulham, which could potentially be a skip regardless. Obviously, Neto was probably the player which most of them looked at. It looks like he's going to be out for quite a while now.
I imagine the contingencies from those that weren't playing Sky Fantasy 3 years ago when they had that bringing Neto 4 games before you're due to captain requirements from him.
Like 4 games before, wasn't it, or something we were doing?
Yeah, so because it was only hop on point, I think, that you could prepare in time for it, and everyone brought him in, and he was out for that whole period.
He was.
I know I'm going off one thing, but it's one of those ones that sits with you if you remember it well. Probably Wilson with you in that scenario, and there's a few others as well where there's been a good hop on point and the player gets injured. Gabbiadini I've mentioned a few times in that scenario as well.
We've called this section log out the app, basically, because a lot of engaged managers, especially, we've had a lot of questions and comments around it as well on Twitter this week, have said that there's not much they can do. And some have said, we've even had some now in the chat, I don't need to make any until overhaul, and I'm only going to make one until overhaul. I would say we do have an international break in a couple of weeks, and there are a lot of fixtures to play until then. So I guess most people will still use a fair few transfers until the overhaul. That's the first thing I'd say. However, I do get the sentiment, because I agree with it, that on paper, looking at my team now, there's just not an awful lot I've changed in terms of need or want. We've all got a couple of players. I've just got a quick slide next. I've got Simicast, Saka, and Son. It seems that most managers have got, if not all these three, like two of the three, but maybe they're missing one of these three in terms of what the template looks like. But what's your take on the next few weeks up until the festive period, and how do you see it playing out?
I was thinking how I was going to answer the questions coming up on this, and Ian Parron put a long semi-reply to quite a similar question in one of the WhatsApp hub chats, which I thought articulated it really well. And the question was more orientated around why would you keep this? Feels like a normal season, whereas recent seasons gone by haven't been so much, and therefore, if all the engaged managers are holding transfers back to the end of the season as a viable strategy to play more aggressively now. Whilst that, like, in my opinion, it is, but you get the more pure 3 for zeros with the cup rearrangements, and you can like lump on teams in that scenario later in the season. However, Ian mentioned at this stage just now, most people have got close to what I think their overhaul team would look like. Like there does, like you had mentioned, the template earlier on, and I tend to agree with that as well. And yes, you could take out a player and get a fixture gain out of it, but because everyone's got an optimal-ish team, there is a significant risk that the person that you take out in one game less will outscore the person that you're bringing in over the long run, because you've got captaincies covered and such like as well. It's maybe a little bit different if you have someone that's going to be captain. You don't own someone that's going to be captained multiple times. And another question came in about Son and owning Maddison and wanting to do the flip. Yeah. I think I probably would do the daisy chain move if you believe that Son is the best captaincy for the Spurs single game days, which I believe he is. You might want to consider take out Salah, who plays before Spurs, bring in Son for Salah, and then move Maddison back to Salah the following week when you get the fixture gain. It's whether you weigh up in that scenario, does Maddison plus a transfer outweigh 15 points? And I think, does he score 15 points and the value of a transfer over that period of time, which is possibly borderline if you're using any of the projected points tools. But yeah, I'm the same as you. I brought in Mitoma. Do I want Tsimikas? Do I want Diaby for some of the fixtures? Yes, but there's a fear that I could take out a player because I'm comfortable with my team. There's a fear that I could take out a player that even with a fixture less would outscore them, and therefore I'm likely to hold off. And this feels like the patience period that we talk about quite a lot. And I've probably used more transfers than what I would have wanted at this stage. I think it's fair to say you've definitely used more transfers than what you would have wanted to use as well.
I still don't think I change it. This is the thing.
But what I'm saying, I think from our experience of playing in the game now, that you can see this as a patience period, and be more willing to see it out now without making a luxury move, even if it's a player that's got semi-reasonably high ownership. Like, I don't think you own Tsimikas either, so like a move like that.
Yeah, and don't forget, in terms of Mitoma, you weren't just looking at Mitoma for like a week or two, right? You were looking at the whole period, this long period now, because we identified last week that the way the fixtures had fallen going into December, that it was quite easy to kind of navigate. So looking at Brighton's fixtures, Everton, Sheffield United, Forest, Chelsea, home to Brentford, home to Burnley, they're a really spanking run of fixtures. Yeah. And they land on the Saturday as well. So I think they've got 6 games to a lot of other teams 5 as well. So you just got to, when we make these decisions on things like Mitoma versus Diaby versus Tsimikas, etc., you're looking at that block of 6 weeks and not just the 1 week, aren't you? So, yep, very, very sensible, mate. And I feel the same. In terms of like differentiation, there's been some in the chat. There's been something in the chat to say that Neto will probably be back in a couple. So he's announced he'll be out for 2 weeks. In which case he could be back actually then for the single game day, Monday, which is Monday the 27th of November, which we'll see the team sheets for as well, right? Which is good.
I'm definitely not getting them.
Oof, we'll see about that, Paul. We'll see about that. But Yeah. Other than that, you spotted a run of fixtures for a team coming up over the festive period,
Yeah,
which could actually change a couple of plans as we go into December.
yeah. So it's Chelsea's fixture run in December, and there's a couple of reasons why I've highlighted this. One is a fantastic run, and there's a Sunday hop on point. I think it's the 10th of December. Before they embark on a great run, of which there's a single game day in there against the Wolves. But I was also looking at what chain moves I was considering doing. So I'm favouring making the keeper move to pick up Jose Sa against Fulham. I've got good memories of owning Sa. And I think I've only ever owned them in one period
It was
in
towards
Sky
the end of
before.
a season, wasn't it? It was a single game
Yeah,
day, 22 points. I remember a couple of seasons ago, wasn't it?
yeah. He done fantastic for me. So I am considering making that move as well. I think the immediate fixture after that's against Arsenal. So not the best immediate fixture beyond that, but then after that they've got a nice fixture run, and their fixture run ends when Chelsea starts as well. So there might be a nice chain move there. Or the fallback is that I keep Sa and I captain him against Chelsea, and I don't bring in Chelsea. However, if Thiago Silva's not injured at that point, I do think that his run for Chelsea at that
Hell
point
of
in
a
time
run,
is
isn't it?
something we're considering as well. So I've definitely got a few options there. So I'm not going on the basis that I won't make any transfers, but there's a couple of patterns that I think I can pick up extra games and perhaps differentials on players that I won't necessarily captain, but sitting in amongst the big high hitting captains that I'll be having in the team already.
Just having a quick look to see what that does, just in terms of the fixtures going up to the Luton game for Chelsea. It's a 5-4-3 over certain teams as well, over like Arsenal, Liverpool, Brighton, Brentford, and Bournemouth as well. So if you add in the one or two captaincies, there's a 6-for-3 there. We just touched on Brighton, for example. Their really good run. Their really good run kind of ends on that Saturday the 9th as well. So the Sunday the 10th will be a nice hop on point, like Mitoma to Silva, obviously depending on costs and stuff or whatever, or even Palmer. Palmer's looked really good if you're looking for an enabler as well. But yeah, so it's a good run that, and say 5-for-3 with captaincy, 6-for-3 potentially. I can see a few transfer news there, and it's interesting because we'll touch on this probably in a couple of weeks. There's probably not a lot of point touching on it yet because the double game week haven't been confirmed yet, but when we know the overhaul date, when we know when that Man City Brentford fixture is going to be slotted in, it could be that there's a dead end period for Man City, for example, who end up with like a 3-for-1 over certain teams. In which case, we all know what happens when that happens. There's a bit of a pile-on. So I think this is why when you look at these little fixture runs, allied with all the fixtures aren't confirmed yet because of the double injuries, suspensions, I still think there will be a lot of transfers used before the overhaul. I still think I'm going to use a minimum of like, I don't want to, but I think I'm going to use a minimum of like 5 to 7, and I think most probably still will, to be honest, because there's so much football still to be played. We've used how many weeks have we? How many matches have we had now? Like 10, is it? Obviously, some have had blanks, or some have had 9, or so 9 or 10, whatever it is. But there's nearly that much to play again up until the overhaul. So just can't see it happening. So I just think in terms of transfers, I still keep an eye on it because there's still opportunities. There will still be issues. The Christmas period is mental as well, right, for rotation and stuff. So.
My hope is that when the TV fixtures get announced post overhaul for that run, that it's not an obvious overhaul team to pick.
Yeah.
That there's like not having to cover off certain captaincies and then being able to play the difference. So, for example, if Arsenal played on every day that City played, and you're going to captain Haaland, then would you need Saka type or situation, just to give a bit of variety? But it doesn't often work like that. And when you do get the if there's extra fixtures at the start, people will lump on those teams. I think there was one year where Liverpool had kind of 4 games over 2 for a lot of teams at the start, and everyone had Firmino and Salah and
I think some even jumped like Henderson and people like that, didn't they? Loads of people jumped
right.
on that.
Yeah.
Just looking at one of the things as well normally which causes quite a big disruption in fixtures is the Carabao Cup in it, because normally the final is around, I want to say middle to end of February. And that causes obviously a blank game week for a team that week, and then that fixture is re-put in elsewhere. Normally it's Man City, right? They've been in the last, is it four finals, or 3 of the last 5 or 4 of the last 5, wherever it is, or or Man United, wherever it is. But I can't remember who the semi-finalists actually are for the Carabao Cup. I know a lot of the big teams are out of that as well, which is a shame, because I quite like it when...
Well, it's this week. It's this Carabao Cup's this week.
Oh, it's this week. Oh, we'll know then, won't we? It'll the final take place on Sunday, the 25th of February. But that always causes a bit of disruption, doesn't it? So I'm just trying to see who's in it. I can't even remember who's...
Well, it won't be City got put out. City got put out by Newcastle in previous when they play Man United this week.
Yeah, be good to see. It'd be good to 4th round fixtures. Yeah, the big teams left. Man United are playing Newcastle, so one of those will be out. Bournemouth, Liverpool, Chelsea, Blackburn, West Ham and Arsenal, one of them will be out. And that's about it, really. So they're the only ones even left in. And Man United and Newcastle, West Ham and Arsenal, one of them is going to knock each other out. So, interesting there. There's a lot of... That was what I remembered. So a lot of the big teams are all playing each other. And a lot of it is like Mansfield and Port Vale, Ipswich and Fulham, Exeter and Middlesbrough are all playing each other as well. So the way it's panned out isn't ideal for for that kind of run where you get that sudden 4-for-1 where Man City or something like that have these incredible fixtures. So. But we'll know that later on, won't we? Let's have a look at the game week coming up. Fulham and Man United on Saturday, the early kickoff. What's going on with Man United, mate?
It's dreadful, isn't
it? You said that with such a solemnity there as well.
I don't support an English team, but I was very much a anybody but United kind of fan growing up. But I think it was more just like everyone supported them when we were at school and everyone had the strips. Yeah,
I think I've said this before, but a lot of kids in my school were all Liverpool Man United fans, and me as a a kind of enthusiastic, the only Spurs supporter in my school, they used to call Snottenham to me, and I used to get really offended and upset. So have it up, United Liverpool fans, top of the league. Did you see Anthony's booking on the weekend?
He could have got sent off for that.
He's a little rat, isn't he? Flipping egg. He's awful. Sheffield United Wolves 3:00, Man City Bournemouth, Everton Brighton, Burnley Palace, Brentford West Ham. Back to the big 3:00. Newcastle Arsenal. What a game that is at 5:30. Haaland captain. Hump to Bournemouth, probably about as easy as it gets.
Yeah, I don't know that, even though Arsenal play Burnley at home the following week, I don't know that I'd be in any rush to get Salah now. Saka now, if I didn't own.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I didn't think he looked fit at the weekend again. Saliba, I think, cover him off in the short term. It is a bit of a gamble on Saturday the 11th. That's the following week. When I still think that he will be the most captained, but that's through teams already holding him, rather than like I captained him on Saturday there, and I had a few DMs asking about would the people rip up their teams to get him in, and I'd advise not getting rid of Son, knowing that you're going to use Son for captaincies, and that worked out nicely, even though I did it myself, and it's a different position when I already owned him, and I held him through that period where he was injured as well.
Yeah, it's interesting with that Saka, and I think as well with Arsenal, you've got Saliba, as he proved on the weekend, as a very, very viable captaincy alternative, whereas with Haaland, you probably haven't, have you? There's no real alternative to captaincy for Haaland, potentially Rodri. Maybe Diaz, but we all know Diaz is also susceptible at times to rotation. So I think with Saka, you have got Saliba, as again proved on the weekend that you can do it. Sunday the 5th, Forest and Villa, Luton and Liverpool. Guessing Salah will probably be the most captained on that day. Any opportunities for anything or?
Do you think after Watkins is blank last weekend that even if people may have considered Watkins as an option there and now will have been put off by last weekend's outcome? And I know we're talking underlying stats, that was his highest XGI of the season so far. But outcomes do bias people's opinions on things, right?
Oh, they do, definitely. We're going to talk about Nakamba in a second. But I just think that Liverpool-Luton game, it's just Luton. Luton and Sheffield United are proving nearly every week. You just have to target them. They're just, shocking defensive teams. And, anyone who goes against them really is going in and scoring goals. I don't think there's been any real... I know Sheffield United have scored a couple of goals against teams, but, the way they played on the weekend, I know Arsenal were very good, but Arsenal just battered them. Think Sheffield United had 0.03 XG that game, and Arsenal scored 5. Could have scored more. But I just think Liverpool-Luton, it's just a game to target. Forest are pretty decent at home, quite resolute. Villa are not that good away either, or at least not as good as they are at home. So I can't see anything but a Salah there personally. Well, move to Tsimikas. One of the things, so Nakamba went from a dud to the most essential player in the game. Now he's blanked the last twice. He's back to a dud again. Nakamba to Tsimikas, we've had some questions around that. Do you think that's potential good move? Maybe. Well, they're playing each other this weekend, but just as a general point, Nakamba, what do you think?
It is an upgrade, but then you need to consider two things, I think. But there is no fixture gain there by doing it. And whilst Tsimikas will be, I'd say, still likely to outscore him on that game in isolation anyway, and therefore if you're looking at what the cost of the transfer is and you think that Tsimikas will get 15 more points than Nakamba will to overhaul, then fine. Does the 0.6, whilst looks small, knowing the players that you need for captaincy and such, like, does that fault future moves? Like, if you are thinking of getting a Fulham or a Wolves player in, I think the goalies will be popular.
Even like Areola to Sanchez when the Chelsea move comes, if you want to get up to Thiago Silva.
Yeah, you've got the money for that, because I think they're the same price. But if you were going to Sa or to Leno, I think Leno's 6.7 or 6.8. Yeah. So, right, does it allow future moves? And if you're covered off nicely and all of those things, and you think that Tsimikas will outscore them by 15 points to overhaul, then go for it. But if you don't, or you're not too sure, or that leaves you nothing in the bank to play with and no contingency, then I'd maybe reconsider or at least think that through.
Yeah, fair point. Spurs home to Chelsea on Monday.
My order of preference on captaincy is Son, then Romero, then Maddison. So in that order is who I would captain if I owned all three. And do I think that Romero could cover Son? Yes, I think he could cover Son, but I still think that Son's got the highest ceiling of any. And if I owned Romero and Maddison, would I be considering manoeuvring to get Son? If this was a game in isolation, of which I'd be captain him, if you think that Son's going to be the best captain on this day, and then Spurs play Nottingham Forest on a Friday coming up, of which you might then feel that Son's going to be the best captain on that day too. If you're of that belief, then I maybe would consider getting him in and trying to manoeuvre things around. If you don't and you're comfortable with Romero, or you don't believe that you'll make up the 30 points of which the two transfers would cost you, if you do go on the basis that a transfer is worth 15 points, then perhaps not.
Romero got something like 140 passes against Palace or something was something like that, wasn't it? It's been absolutely ridiculous on Friday night. He's just he's a passing machine, and
I think he's got the record for most successful passes for Spurs in a single Premier League game now after that.
Okay. And I think Dunk got the record this weekend for the highest in a Premier League game this season, 147, 150 something.
I think, yeah, Gundogan's got the record. I think it was last season. He got like 165 or 170 or something like that. But he was close to it because he was on like 100 odd at half time as well.
Yeah, what didn't Dunk hit tier 2 passing after like 25 minutes or something crazy like that? Good stuff. Just a quick look at the transfer stats. Average transfers remained unchanged in the last week. Top 10, 17.7 to 14.9. Top 100, 20.1 to 16.6. Top 1,000, 27.2 to 24.7. And top 5,000, 32.1 to 29.9. So the top 5,000, this was pre this weekend, are now down to under 30 transfers, and we do expect that to level out and obviously rise the longer the season goes on. For any new players, don't get fooled that these are going to continue to go down, because they won't. They will level out and they will increase as the more engaged managers move into these spots. Just a general question, Paul. I touched on it earlier. I had 41 transfers left at November the 12th last year, with the 15 game weeks. I was obviously quite cautious there. I didn't go for certain moves, whereas this year I've used quite a lot more than that now. But I genuinely feel I probably made one or two mistakes maybe, but nothing too crazy. I think all the moves I've made have been genuinely moves I would normally make. I suppose just wanted to touch on the fact that when you compare seasons, lots of things are different, aren't they? I feel that the way the season's gone so far, I've definitely used a lot more transfers. I'm going to use even more by Christmas, but I don't think I would change an awful lot. My rank doesn't reflect it, so normally you'd hope that when you use more transfers early, your rank reflects that. It doesn't at the moment. I'm not panicky at all, but I have had a couple of seasons like this before where once you get stuck in this rut of, you can't. I find it hard to climb out of the top few thousand unless you've got plenty of transfers in hand. Just, I suppose, what's your thoughts on the season so far, the transfer usage up until the overhaul, and your general observations of the season?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I wouldn't look at this as any gauge at all. And what I think you'd be better doing, and maybe I'll do so, or I'll get Dan to do so, is put out a poll of, are you in the top 5,000, outside the top 5,000, and have you got over or less transfers? And we can kind of work out an average amongst engaged managers that way, because I think that'd be a better indication of how you're doing against your peers. And at this stage last year, like, from going on to win it, I think I was 550th and had used maybe 10 or 11 transfers or something like that at this point. But you're right, seasons are different. I still believe this patience period. If you're not falling drastically and you're retaining the transfers here, there's multiple plans of which you could develop at overhaul time, which is a better starting point for generating a plan than you are in this kind of fluid period just now, where most people have got 11 players that they either are or were comfortable holding at one point in time. Like things like Onana now, if you still got Onana now in goals, yet no side's particularly great defensively at the moment in the league anyway. Even Newcastle started leaking a few goals, and then they go on a poor fixture run. So I wouldn't be in any keen state to move on. This season has been different because of some horrible single day captaincies, and those teams had multiple single day captaincies as well. So it's not a case of ignoring a single fixture. There was a few things there, and there was budget players from each of them as well that made it more tempting. And there was a lot of uncertainty about even the goalkeeping positions just now, because I think Ian Parriman, he had said that he's got Turner in goals, who over the course has actually been a great asset, and he's only 6.1, covered off a few of those single day game days instead of the one you that a lot of people moved on to and then had to move off as well. And when you're in a rush to move off these players, you're often not thinking of multiple moves down the line. It's who can I get for that budget, and if it's not the emergence of a João Palhinha from last season, then you're sometimes scraping the barrel on who to get and who to move on. I think Jordan Bear's another one as well. If you're building your team around kind of 6.6 million players, so it is different. You do have to get a bit lucky on some of the 50-50 calls that you're making to jump up the ranks, but there's different strategies that can be deployed. One, I was looking, someone in one of the group chats has got 3 Liverpool defenders. Like they've got Alisson, Tsimikas, and Van Dijk. And like they picked up the clean sheet yesterday, and with the bonuses as well. And they've got play Luton this week, and then Liverpool still got a nice run after that. Like run. That's not a left field, like a completely left field move. That's not like you dribbling up on like Palace defence or something like that. That's whilst Liverpool perhaps aren't putting up the defensive stats which they previously did, they've got great fixtures, and then you've got Van Dijk who like starts on kind of 5 points every game, and Tsimikas has proved now that he can pick up bonus as well, and Alisson always seems to pick up saves bonus even when Liverpool were on top and their defensive stats were better. So there is different strategies. I wouldn't worry too much about things now. There's 3 factors when I think about where I am and if I'm considering compare myself against others, which I tend not to do because I feel it does more bad than good when you're doing that, especially when you're pairing who's got X amount of transfers and is an experienced manager and has X amount of points as well. It's hard. It's even hard for me when I'm think of considering myself against other people at. But there's one thing on top of that as well. It's how your team's set up at the moment. So if you're set up, you might be set up better than others that aren't doing like revealing their team as well. So if you factor that into it, and you don't have any planned transfers and you're happy with the 11 players you've got, I definitely think that that's an underrated element to like when you're doing that comparison part.
Yeah, no, that's really fair. And I think looking at the next few weeks, we've already said right that we don't think that there's going to be masses of transfer activity, especially in the next maybe before mid-December potentially, apart from the Wolves and Fulham game. It's going to be interesting, I think, to have these conversations around transfer preservation and discipline, because it's easy to say every week, innit? But it's very hard to do. And we kind of said before we came on this evening, there's not an awful lot to actually talk about, is it? But I think we've done a good job actually to talk through kind of what we've talked about. But the whole strategy and discipline side is what so many Sky managers, and especially first time sort of managers, those in their first or second season struggle with, is the ability, and it's that you normally get it through experience of sitting on your hands and just knowing, or not, well, being reasonably confident that a plan is going to get together, and your plan of patience will pay off in the long term. But when you're going down in rank, when you feel you've used too many transfers, when you feel things are not going your way, you're not getting the rub of the green, that's when it's very easy to dig yourself into a hole in it. And I think this is what I'm going to start to feel over these next few weeks now, because I think I've used more transfers than I'd like. I'm not at the rank I'd like. And judging by how yesterday, for example, went, I thought I had a half decent day yesterday and I dropped 20% in rank. And we all have these days, don't we, sometimes, where you think, oh, that's all right. And, or when you've been spanked and you look and your rank's gone down from like 5k to 7.5k. And then by the following Saturday, you're 9k and then you're 11k, and the spiral's just getting ever worse. So it's going to be an interesting period now, I think, for managers for those who will actually sit in their hands and play the long game.
Or they force transfers. Or they force transfers if they're not.
This is exactly what I'm getting at, is you can very easily force yourself to use 5 transfers, but they're actually detrimental to your team in the short term, because you're bugging about with your team and you don't really need to, but more so in the longer term, because those 5 transfers could be used so much better later down the line when there's a 5-for-2 pylon for Arsenal in the second half of the season. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks.
Yeah, running at the weekend, I never had enough budget for this, so it was never in my consideration. But if there was one player that I really wanted to get to, it was Boateng. And then one performance has now changed my mind on him. It's like can be so fickle sometimes based on the outcome and performance
week
in
on
one
week,
single
mate.
game.
You know, it's week on week. You know, those I think Sudge had Diaby over Watkins on last week's pod, and you know he wasn't panicking. He was just like, you know, I'd rather have Watkins, but I've got Diaby. Whereas now, you know, who are you bringing in from Villa? Oh, well, it's got to be Diaby now, and that is kind of the way the game goes, right? Look at Nakamba again; he's gone from duds to essential to dud. Simicast, you know, he's only a game away. He's only one early sub away from being. I want to get rid of Simicast. If he plays next week and he's brought off in the 55th minute, everyone will want to get rid of him again. So it's having that, having the discipline to keep it cool and play the long term. You know, everyone reasonably should now have a team that they're kind of happy with. They thought it through. They've looked at the fixtures. They've looked at the future month, and you know, like you say, you know, the pick you went with this week. All right, it didn't work out this week, but you know, you've got a month. You're not just move him on back onto Diaby, because obviously that wouldn't make sense. But anyway, I'm rambling.
There was quite a few people that didn't that I know and speak to quite a lot as well that hadn't realised about the clean sheet rule in Sky about your team having to keep the clean sheet for the whole game. I've been on the wrong side of that multiple times, and maybe why it was ingrained into my thinking. So it doesn't operate the same way as FPL and Dream Team does, where your team has to keep the clean sheet for the full game. In those games, if you come off and you played 60 minutes and your team's kept a clean sheet intact whilst you've been on the park, then you'll get the clean sheet points. But yeah, in Telegraph and on Sky, you lose it based on your team conceding.
Yeah. Just interesting before we shoot, Jude Bellingham has finished 18th in the Ballon d'Or. Harry Kane 19th. I reckon they will both finish a lot higher next season.
I think so.
We've answered most of the questions. Thank you so much to those who have brought them in. But that is it for us for this week. A quiet one this week, I think. Nice chat around kind of strategy and discipline. But yeah, a quietish one this week. Thank you all so much to those who joined us this evening on this earlier time. Apologies, I've got a date. Not a date. I've got an engagement this evening, which I had to attend. That's why we're going a bit early. But your continued support, as usual, everyone, is very, very much appreciated. And thank you, Paul. Where can people find you?
On Twitter at Paul McAnulty1, MCANULTY.
My handle on Twitter is at FFH_Fergi, and you can also follow us at FFH_Sky. If you like what you watched, please press the like button. We really appreciate it. Remember to subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast and leave some comments. We'll be back next week, previewing Sky Game Week 14, which I think is the last one before the international break again. They're rattling around, aren't they? Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's good. Everyone doesn't like international breaks apart from Scotland fans at the moment. So,
and me, I don't mind them as well. To be honest, I like the break. But yeah, Scotland fans are laughing. Are you going away? You're going away, aren't you? On the break?
No, it's Georgia away, which I'm not going to.
Okay.
Norway at home.
Norway at home. That's the one. Yeah,
I'll be at the Norway game.
Nice. We wish you all the very best of luck for Game Week 13, and goodbye for now.